Welcome to the 700 Club. Russian troops continue to advance in Ukraine. They're now encroaching on the capital city of Kiev. Credible reports also indicate that Russian soldiers are holding hostage the staff of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant.
Critics say President Biden's sanctions on Russia aren't tough enough, and many warn that Putin goes far beyond Ukraine. Brody Carter has the story.
People in Ukraine's capital of Kyiv woke to gunfire in several areas today as Russian forces pushed deeper into the country. The outskirts of Kyiv felt the brunt of the aggression after unleashing airstrikes on cities and military bases. Intelligence wars of Russian spies and saboteurs near Kyiv. Every day, people have been forced to hide in subway tunnels from missile strikes, now targeting residential buildings. The city of Kyiv is home to more than 2.8 million people. Many have become journalists on the ground, using cell phones to capture the first images of war. Russian troops have entered from the north, east, and south. The president of Ukraine says Kyiv is the main target. Ukraine's president urging citizens to stand and fight. CBN's George Thomas is in the city of Lviv in Ukraine.
President Zelensky urged everyone between the ages of 18 and 60 take up arms. They are no match for the Russian army. And the reality is that in a fairly short order, Ukraine could be in the hands of the Kremlin.
Russian forces have also taken over many strategic positions, including the Chernobyl nuclear power plant.
We are outraged by credible reports that Russian soldiers are currently holding the staff of the Chernobyl facilities hostage.
President Biden and U.S. allies responding to Russia's invasion with sanctions.
Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time.
Critics, including Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, says those sanctions are not enough.
Sir, sanctions clearly have not been enough to deter Vladimir Putin to this point. What is going to stop him?
No one expected the sanctions to prevent anything from happening.
That the administration had argued the threat of sanctions was designed to stop an invasion. And they say more sanctions are needed now. Putin also raised another threat, that Russia might use nuclear weapons if anyone tried to use military action to stop its takeover of Ukraine. And Putin may have more on his mind than just Ukraine.
The president was asked today, what if this goes beyond Ukraine? And he said, if Putin moves into NATO countries, we will be involved. He said, we will be involved. Is this a possibility?
Is it a possibility that Putin goes beyond Ukraine? Sure, it's a possibility.
Like many international analysts, the president says capturing Ukraine is not his ultimate endgame.
He has much larger ambitions in Ukraine. He wants to, in fact, reestablish the former Soviet Union. That's what this is about.
Brody Carter, CBN News.
Well, for more analysis on this story, joining us is Victoria Coates. She's a distinguished fellow at the American Foreign Policy Council, and she's a past deputy national security advisor under President Trump. So tell us, what are Putin's long-range goals beyond Ukraine?
Well, good morning, Gordon. Thank you for having me on. I think, unfortunately, we're watching play out in real time Vladimir Putin's stated ambition to reassemble the Soviet Union. And, you know, a year ago, it would have been unthinkable to have tanks rolling into a sovereign nation and an ally of the United States like Ukraine. But that's where we are now. And I think the administration has to start taking very, very serious steps to stop this contagion from spreading into our other NATO allies in Europe.
Well, if other NATO allies are invaded, and that's, you know, you look at a map and you can see the NATO countries surrounding Ukraine, what would then be triggered under the current treaties with NATO?
Well, we do have what are known as our Article 5 obligations, which is that force is a possible response when a NATO ally is attacked. And the only time Article 5 has been invoked is after the terrorist attacks in the United States on 9/11. So it's very, very rare. But in the case of potential incursions into Poland or the Baltics, I think right now the administration has to take the strongest possible steps so Putin knows there is going to be very significant ramifications if he takes that action. And so the sanctions that we've seen so far just simply are not strong enough. And I'd point out that in January, bipartisan support for sanctions on Putin's Nord Stream 2 pipeline were on the table in the Senate and could have passed. And the administration chose instead to lobby against those sanctions. So we've had these opportunities to send a message to Putin. It's long overdue, and they have to start today.
Well, he's already put nuclear weapons on the table. He's already said if there's any response, he is willing to use nuclear weapons. Are we looking at World War III?
We don't have to be, Gordon. That's the whole tragedy of this situation. It is happening because of the inertia and I would say the myopia of the U.S. administration, which seems far more focused on getting a new deal with the Iranian regime in Vienna on the nuclear program and on climate issues than they are on actually stopping World War III from breaking out. I know you have another guest on who was a witness to World War II who uses the very powerful words, never again. They have to mean something. We cannot go through this again in Europe. And there are steps we can take to prevent it. We should start immediately, sanction the Russian National Bank, sanction Putin himself, so that he knows America's not going to stand for this.
Well, speaking of sanctions, we haven't sanctioned the oil and natural gas coming out of Russia. And apparently that is now financing the invasion. So why do we still allow them to export oil and gas?
It's absolutely mindless. And as an alum of the Department of Energy, as well as the National Security Council staff, I know firsthand how powerful the American energy renaissance was under President Trump, which allowed us to become one of the world's great exporters of oil and gas. And it's a tremendous strategic advantage to us. But when President Biden, on day one of his administration, canceled the Keystone Pipeline, he took more than 800,000 barrels a day offline for the continental United States. And now we import more than 500 million barrels a day from Russia. So we're literally paying Putin to invade Ukraine. We're financing it. And the best response the administration could come up with yesterday was former Secretary, now Special Envoy Kerry, complaining that maybe this would distract Putin from cooperation on climate change. It makes no sense. And so I think we need to develop a very powerful domestic energy incentivization program to massively expand our production of gas and oil, export that to our friends, consume it domestically, do not pay Putin, do not reward his aggression and offensive military operations. This is something, again, we could start today if we wanted to. It would have been great if we'd started 6 months ago or if we hadn't turned it off a year ago. But we have this capacity. We have this strength. And all we need to do is have the will to grab it. So very much hope the administration will start to see this clear picture.
Well, let's change theaters and talk about China. Taiwan just warned yesterday that more Chinese planes are entering their defense zones. It seems like every single week we have a new sortie of Chinese planes entering into Taiwan airspace. Are they going to take advantage of this? Is Taiwan now at risk?
I think they absolutely are. And that's, again, why this is such a dangerous situation, is these things are related. There are always those in Washington who want to sort of stovepipe one problem from the other and say, well, we're going to pivot to Asia so we can't pay attention to Ukraine, and we're going to pull out of the Middle East. Unfortunately, President Xi of China is watching all of these things. And he has, as Putin did with Ukraine, Xi has with Taiwan, made very, very clear his intentions to regain control of the island. I've been speaking with a number of former Taiwanese colleagues in recent days. They are deeply, deeply concerned by what's happening in Ukraine. They made public statements yesterday in support of the legitimate government of Ukraine. And I think, again, as the United States, we have to be extremely firm on this. We have to make our red lines clear on Taiwan. And for us, I mean, this is not simply a case of supporting another democracy, something I'm in favor of, but Taiwan is such a critical partner in terms of the semiconductor industry and other high-tech products we desperately need in this country. this is simply a case of self-interest, that we cannot afford to lose Taiwan. And so getting the administration very clearly focused on that, even given these other crises that are burgeoning up around the globe, I think is critical.
Could you spell it out for us? I'm not sure the average American understands the impact here. So we've seen wheat prices go through the roof because Ukraine is one of the world's largest suppliers of red wheat. We've seen oil and gas go up because of the conflict. What would happen if China invades Taiwan? How would that impact the average American?
Well, I would take it right back to the semiconductor industry, the semiconductors that power so many things in our lives, from cars, computers, whatever products that we need and want. Taiwan very strategically developed a tremendous capacity in that industry and are one of our key partners, because we've sort of fallen off in our own domestic production, something we should also get after. But for the moment, Taiwan, a good friend and ally, can be our supplier. But if all of your viewers have had issues, as I think we all have, with the supply chain over the last year, and the snarls in that, and the difficulties of getting anything from a couch to a car, that will be exponentially higher. And so, you will have compounded the inflationary pressures from the Ukraine invasion, with potentially a disruption in goods and supplies into the United States because of Taiwan. We could be looking at a very difficult period.
Well, Victoria, thank you for the analysis. Thanks so much for being with us.
Wish I had been. Thanks, Gordon.
All right, thank you. If you're interested in helping people in Ukraine, Operation Blessing, CBN, we've been working there for now over 3 decades. We have disaster relief teams forming on the border of Poland, but we're also right there in the really hard-hit areas, the eastern part of Russia. And I thought we had some B-roll of just how bad it is, and there's some of the destruction that's happening. But we also have of You in Action, where Operation Blessing teams are now working in eastern Ukraine, in the very heart of this, and they're delivering food. We have a kitchen operating that has been operating, but we're also bringing bags of food to people in need. If you want to participate, it's real easy. All you have to do is call us, 1-800-700-7000, and say, I want to be a part of Operation Blessing Disaster Relief.